we got here? That's pretty. A beautiful coral spring, which makes very pretty patterns when it's rotating, or so I thought when I saw this 30 years ago. But it turns out this is actually a wrist exerciser, which is the subject of these items here. With this one here, you're not supposed to spin it, but you can, of course, but you're supposed to squeeze it like this many times to develop the forearm and the wrist muscles, and then the left hand like this. What's not nice about it is, as well as looking aesthetic and pleasing, and it's got a rather nice way of opening it, is it feels very nice in the hand. It's got a lovely tactile feeling to it. So a wrist exerciser for people who want to do wrist exercises with something which looks very aesthetically pleasing. Something not so pleasing to look at, but this is much more functional, is this one here called My Gripper, this is serious stuff now. It's got pounds to kilograms table at the back. It's got two counters here, and when I set them to 0, the first one will just show how many grips I've done. The second one shows how strong the grip is, because inside is a strong spring which is resisting my squeeze. So the first squeeze, and we get a figure of 1 squeeze and a value of 20 or whatever it is kilograms, and then it adds it up. And the idea is after about 50 you've just about squeezed up or lifted a ton weight, I suppose, and so on. That's serious exercises, and you can make it a proper regime for yourself. Then on a more playful line, this one here, which came out of China only about 30 years ago, but I suspect they've been made for many, many years there. They're called healthy balls. They've got rather nice little sounds inside. They're almost hollow, not quite. And the idea is you put them on your hand and rotate them around like this. And that's basically a good exercise, and then the left hand as well. What fascinated me, which is why I bought them originally, was the video which I showed in the shop had a wonderful looking Chinese, almost like a Confucian scholar he was, standing, rotating balls a bit bigger than these. These ones here, in fact, which are much, much heavier. These are proper solid ball bearings, whereas these are hollow and pretty. But he had 3 of these in this hand, and he had a 4th one on top, and that was amazing. He kept it in the same position as he rotated the pieces round. He had a second hand doing it, and did wonderful movements with his body as well. Absolutely amazing. I could just about do the 3 balls, but only just. But I could not, for the life of me, manage to maintain the 4th ball and the pyramid at the top, and to then have a second hand was just quite staggering. But he was obviously a highly expert and proficient at doing the Chinese healthy balls, so I think most people just are happy to do that. It's a nice one, and it's tuneful as well. There's quite a nice little one here, which is a kind of squeezy toy where it's got a nice bit of, I don't know, silica rubber or sponge inside, and you pull and push, and it's really meant for people to squeeze in different directions, and again to develop the wrist muscles for people who need to do some work in it. And it makes all sorts of lovely faces too, so for children it's a bit more playful, and therefore I think it's a bit more fun. Probably the best of all my wrist exercising toys is this one here, which came out about 40 years ago. I've got a copy of the patent going back to 1971. It's called the Dynabee, and you probably know it in this form here as the Powerball. And this is how it originally came out in its packaging, on a lovely plinth like this. At that time, in 1979 was the first time it was marketed, they came out with a slightly larger version which has never appeared again, and this one is a bit harder to hold. Now the idea of these, which I'll come forward to the modern one for this to show you the effect, is you speed it up by putting a cord around it and pull hard, and then you do action like this, moving around in very slow movements. And this new version, which came out only about 10 years ago, has got a dynamo inside it, LEDs, so it's a lovely blue light coming out of it, and you've got a readout at the top, which I'll show, which has got the speed of it and the number of revolutions and how long you're doing it for, I don't know what else. And there's a lot of force in that now, and it looks wonderful too, isn't it? So the Dynabee's come out a long, long way since it was first reproduced all those years ago. The original version, which was again the second one they produced, was this one here. And inside you'll see all you have is a heavy gimbal, a heavy weight there, which rotates round on an equator with a little frame. And it's got these 2 grooves, one there and one here. And the action is, as you're moving it round, you can get the thing to speed up to a considerable speed. I think I've got about 12,000 RPM as the top speed I've produced from these ones. I think it's the most wonderful toy. I've got many, many different versions of it. And I think that probably the latest ones are the best of them, because they will give you a chance to read out on the dial how fast it's going, what the top speed is, and many other things. And if you can do 2 together, which I've succeeded with occasionally, you're really coming on something. But I think out of all the toys I've got in my collection, 40,000, there's 10 that really stand out. And this, along perhaps with the pin screen and a few others, and the Levitron, is one of the top ones. It's got some wonderful physics to it. And I've got a paper from a physicist from Australia who's written it up. Then coming down to a little more sort of fun things, but things that small children would enjoy if they're asked to do exercises and it's rather boring. You give them a thing called a catch ball, which came out in Germany about 30 years ago, and it helps to develop their ability to anticipate and do a bit of skill, but in addition to that, it also helps them to grasp it very quickly. There's elastication, and it goes from this hand to this hand, and then this hand back to this hand. You've got to grasp it quickly. And that action, like that, is really quite good for children who are having to develop their, well, and adults as well, develop their wrist muscles. And I have to show this one here because I think this is one of my early favourites. And it does actually have a therapeutic purpose. This came out about 40 years ago, and unfortunately, here is its twin, which has suffered a little bit in over 40 years. Rubber perishes, that's the trouble, and this one's been over-squeezed perhaps, but that's what happens to them. This is a reproduction of the first version, and the idea is you squeeze it, and out comes, it's called Panic Pete. But when I showed it to an audience about 30 years ago, a lady physicist, a lady physiotherapist, I should say, said, "That's exactly what I'm looking for. I've got to get kids to do exercises with their wrists, and they find it very boring. When they have something like this, it's great fun." What do you think? Huh.